Start again. Here we go. Caroline Levitt opening. She's wearing all white.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see all of you. With
No,
President Trump as commander-in-chief, the world is a much safer place. After decades in which past presidents coddled and enabled the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, President Trump finally ended the immediate threat of a nuclear Iranian regime.
Opening with flattery. Did not see that coming.
The powerful military in the history of the world executed massive precision strikes on 3 of the Iranian regime's key nuclear facilities. The objective of Operation Midnight Hammer was to destroy the regime's nuclear enrichment capacity and stop the grave nuclear threat posed to the United States, Israel, and the rest of the free world.
Did they destroy? Obliterate? In the history books, we've entered a world of semiotics.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Dan Raisin Kane covered the operation in great detail at their briefing this morning at the Pentagon.
Raisin Kane is not named after the California raisins, I've since learned.
As President Trump has said repeatedly, the United States of America has the greatest, fiercest, and bravest armed forces ever to stride the face of this earth. And we couldn't be more grateful and proud of our nation's warriors. The Iranian regime was weeks away from
Truth be told, the U.S. military was badass in this. I'm going to give credit where due. The B-2 bombers, they nailed it. They should have. If we spent a ton of money, they should be able to do this, but good for them.
The contrast in leadership could not be more clear. Barack Obama and Joe Biden sent pallets of cash, American taxpayer dollars, in a failed attempt to buy the Iranian regime's compliance with a weak and ineffective deal.
To be clear, the pallets of cash was money that we seized from them. So we didn't give them our money, we gave them back their money, and in return had the right to inspect their nuclear weapons enrichment program, which we ended only when Trump ended the nuclear deal. So there's more to the story.
Incredible accomplishment achieved by President Trump and our brave fighter pilots. There is broad consensus emerging already that Iran's nuclear capabilities were indeed destroyed. The
The Brooks Ingman headline says badly damaged. I don't think that's in dispute. Completely destroyed and obliterated is what's at issue.
Why did the president immediately turn to obliterating after the Iranian nuclear threat? Securing peace. Within 48 hours of the devastating strike, President Trump and his team brokered a historic ceasefire between Israel and Iran and officially ended the 12-day war. The Middle East is now shifting away from chaos.
The 12-day war is a good brand. I'm going to say, credit where due. That was Trump at his finest, coming up with some branding.
This was unthinkable at this time last week. And this is what peace through strength looks like. Under President Trump, America will relentlessly advance our interests without being dragged into endless wars.
11 people
His fearless leadership guarantees America is once again respected across the world.
And I will respond.
Just look at what he was able to accomplish at the NATO summit in the Netherlands. Many of you were there. Our allies agreed to invest 5% of their GDP annually in defense because President Trump demanded it. This will be the most significant reinforcement of NATO's collective defense in the history of the NATO alliance. And as a result, the United States of America will carry less of the burden, and our NATO allies will be stronger than ever before.
Honestly,
as NATO Secretary General Ruda put it, for too long, one ally, the United States, and our taxpayers, I may add, carried too much of the burden of that commitment. And that changes today. President Trump made this change possible. We will produce trillions more for our common defense to make us stronger and fairer by equalizing spending between America and our allies. This is the Trump effect. This is what the president meant when he declared that America is back. Now, back here at home, Americans are paying much cheaper prices for gasoline this summer, as both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times pointed out today. Here's how the Wall Street Journal put it. Hitting the road this summer won't bring as much of a big hit to your wallet. The national average for a gallon of regular gasoline is about 23 cents cheaper than this time last year. Analysts say
I think I just need to lower her levels when I speak.
To keep prices down in the coming months. These are the cheapest gas prices at this point of the summer since 2021. And despite all the doom casting from liberal pundits, oil prices on Tuesday were lower than before the Israel-Iran conflict began. As President Trump continues to unleash American energy, our country will have even more efficient, reliable, and affordable energy to protect our national security and fuel our people. Later this afternoon, here at the White House, the president will host a One Big Beautiful event in the East Room to rally Republicans to get the One Big Beautiful bill across the finish line. At that event, he will be joined by everyday Americans from across the country who will massively benefit from the common sense policies and provisions within this bill. This is the largest tax cut for working and middle-class Americans in history,
Right.
and it's going to
But
put more money into the pockets of hardworking Americans. Families will see an average increase in take-home pay of more than $10,000 per year. Americans earning between $30,000 and $80,000 per year will see a 15% tax cut. Overtime and tipped workers will save thousands of dollars annually. And our amazing seniors will receive historic financial relief by reducing the tax burden on their Social Security
She's giving the boss
benefits.
what she wants, right?
Simply put, this bill is going to unlock the golden age of America. And we look forward to continuing to work with the Senate and the House to see this bill on the president's desk for signature by Independence Day. Here in our new media seat today, we have Colin Anderson with the Washington Free Beacon, who will kick off our question and answer. Colin, go
Free
ahead.
Beacon was founded by an anti-Trumper.
You reported yesterday on a briefing from the Israeli defense minister in which she said the U.S. and Israel are working together to monitor any attempts from Iran to rebuild their nuclear program, and also that if Iran was to do so, the U.S. and Israel would work together to once again destroy that nuclear program. Does that align with the president's thinking?
Look, the president, as I said in those opening remarks, Colin, and thanks for being with us today, views the Middle East on its way to peace and prosperity. And the president used strength on Saturday night. The whole world saw that the United States is indeed the most lethal fighting force in the world with those precision strikes on Saturday evening. But the president wants peace. He always has. And right now we're on a diplomatic path with Iran. The president and his team, namely Special Envoy Witkoff, continue to be in communication with the Iranians and especially our Gulf and Arab partners in the region to come to an agreement with Iran. As for our alliance with the State of Israel and that friendship and that partnership between the United States and the State of Israel, I would argue it has never been stronger. And we see a new era in which perhaps some of these Gulf and Arab states can sign on to the Abraham Accords. That was one of the president's most signature accomplishments in his first term, and he'd like to see more of those countries sign on in this second term. So we look forward to sustaining a long and durable peace in the region, and the president wants to do that through a diplomatic solution. But as he proved on Saturday night, he's not willing, he's not afraid to use strength.
It's still a mess, and I'm not confident that he's going to clarify it, but
thanks, Caroline.
it's a different
The president mentioned in a Truth Social post that no enriched uranium was moved from Fordow. What about the other two sites, Isfahan and Natanz? And how can the president be so sure they know uranium was moved?
Well, what I can assure you is that the United States and our intelligence agencies and Director Ratcliffe and the president's entire national security team were obviously watching these sites very closely in the weeks and the days leading up to the attack on Saturday, which I will add was one of the most secretive and successul operations in United States history. I think many of you in this room would agree with that, because none of you in this room knew about the strike on Saturday until it took place. So we were watching closely, and there was no indication to the United States that any of that enriched uranium was moved prior to the strike.
From any of the sites?
Correct.
And then one more thing, Caroline. Next week, the president mentioned that there would be talks with Iran. He didn't mention any details, and Iran has not confirmed them. Can you share any details about any potential talks next week?
We don't have anything scheduled as of now, but I spoke to our Special Envoy Witkoff at length this morning.
A big issue for this crew is the location of the enriched uranium, right? That's going to be the news narrative, a story to uncover. Iran has said that they moved it. The Nuclear Watchdog Committee knows that they moved it, or accepts that they moved it. And the Trump administration has basically admitted they don't know really where it is.
Enrichment civil nuclear program, and there are many other requests that the United States has. Those details continue to really, they're just starting. Of course, the operation was just on Saturday night, but we are in touch. And if there is a meeting, we will let you know, as we always do.
Huge.
Brian.
Please,
Caroline, is two, one on trade. On the July deadline that's coming up for the trade deals, is that deadline still hard and fast for the president?
Trade deals, remember tariffs?
Considering even coming to trade deals after that deadline, and where is he on that going forward?
I think the president
Tariff
has been
deals
asked
almost
this quite a few
seem
times
innocent
by many
now.
of you in the media. I've heard him answer it at press conferences and at gaggles. He just spoke about it on Air Force One. The deadline is not critical. The president can simply provide these countries with a deal if they refuse to make us one by the deadline, and that means the
The
president
deadline doesn't matter. He's going to turn in his paper whenever he seems it
advantageous for the United
is ready.
States and for
Maybe
the American
never.
worker, and he will continue to do that. But as for the deals, our United States Trade Ambassador, Jamison Greer, I speak to him frequently. He's working very hard, and he has had very good and productive discussions with many of our key trading partners.
Working hard, productive discussions.
Conversations on the Hill right now about the Medicaid cuts. Yeah, I'm curious if the final bill that the president's been talking about comes to him and it has Medicaid cuts in it, will he sign it, or would he rather just Congress do away with those cuts?
Our friends in both the Senate and the House know exactly where the president stands on Medicaid. He wants to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse, and they are working to do that in the Senate right now. Jennifer.
One man's waste, fraud, and abuse is another person's.
Is there enough time for Congress to work through the issues it needs to work through? I'm saying, does the president need to move back his deadline a little bit?
We expect that bill to be on the president's desk for signature by July 4th.
It's not going to be on his desk by Independence Day. There's no way. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd be shocked.
This is part of the inner workings of the United States Senate, but the president is adamant about seeing this bill on his desk here at the White House by Independence Day.
And then on Israel, is there a date set for the Prime Minister to visit the White House yet? Is he coming in a couple weeks?
There isn't a date, but the Prime Minister has expressed interest in coming to the White House to meet with the president and come to Washington.
The relationship between Netanyahu and Trump is very different today than it was a week ago.
But we don't have a date when we do.
I credit Trump for changing the conversation.
He was open to sending more Patriot air defense missiles to Ukraine. Is that going to happen? And were there any other assurances that he made directly to Zelensky when they met?
I'll let the president speak on that. That was a private conversation between he and President Zelensky. But the meeting was a good meeting, and it was a meeting towards progress. And the president, as he said, repeatedly wants to see this war.
There was a time that we were very close to a truce or a ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine, and that.
What's the timeline on that, and which countries specifically is the administration looking to have sign on?
Well, the president is certainly hopeful that more countries in the region will sign on to the Abraham Accords. Again, we want to see a long, withstanding, endurable peace in the Middle East, and that's the way to do it.
Even if the countries that are signing the Abraham Accords are not fundamentalist, I think it's a good thing. I think that's changed the dynamic, and I think Trump first administration doesn't get enough credit in traditional media for.
Follow back up on the meeting that the president mentioned about wanting to have this meeting with the Iranians next week. Clearly, there's a willingness here from the administration to want to meet with Iranian officials. What is the holdup here in trying to schedule it? Are you experiencing any resistance from the Iranians?
No, have some patience. We just had this strike on Saturday night. The president secured a ceasefire.
We just bombed them. They probably don't want to come.
In the Netherlands. Now he's back home to have.
Hey, I know you just bombed our facilities, so we're going to just maybe give it a minute before we come to meet with you guys.
We'll get there, and like I said, we're in constant communication.
We just bombed
yesterday that it may not be necessary to have an agreement with the Iranians. What is the purpose? What would be the goal of this meeting?
Again, to continue moving forward towards a long-standing peace in the Middle East. Jordan.
Yes, Caroline, thank you. So the president had some harsh words for both Israel and Iran on Tuesday as he was departing from the NATO summit after they both violated the ceasefire. He said, what's your response to Americans who are worried the peace isn't going to last and think that Israel is trying to plunge us into another endless war on their behalf?
I think the fact that the president was able to successfully negotiate a ceasefire when nobody
Jordan had a basso profundo voice.
To everyone in this room.
I loved his work in
but the president got it done because he wants to see peace in this world. He does not want the United States to be dragged into these conflicts. Again, he's not afraid to use strength if he has to, but the president has already proven he can put America first and deliver on peace at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive goals.
Reclaiming American first. Take that.
After Carrie Lake, she testified in the House Foreign Affairs Committee on the waste, fraud, and abuse and the rot, really, in Voice of America and USAGF. The president called for Congress to kill it. What does that look like, and is the president willing to sign an executive order?
Well, I believe that that action would have to be legislative through Congress, and the president directed Congress to get that done in his Truth Social post yesterday. If there is any executive action that can be taken to cut some of the waste, fraud, and abuse or do away with the program entirely, I'm sure our great Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, is already looking into it. And if it can be done, it will be done here at the White House. But Congress should act as well. To the back. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, Caroline, thank you. The administration
to the back, and then Carrie, I'll come to you.
Yeah, the administration said that the DIA report was low confidence intel. Can you share what other assessments are currently underway to get to the bottom of just how effective these strikes were?
Yes. I can assure you what the CIA director said, that when we look at the entirety of the intelligence that we have to this date, it concludes that these strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities were absolutely successful. It was a total obliteration, as the president said, and not only does our own intelligence say that, but also the Iranian foreign minister has said that. We saw Israel,
but we don't know where the enrichment
based on their own intelligence. We also had the United Nations say that as well. So I think the only other time the United Nations, Israel, Iran, and the United States has agreed on something is that the sky is blue, but they all agree that Iran's nuclear facilities.
That's my dog, Frank, barking.
And I would just like to reemphasize, you mentioned this was a low-confidence preliminary intelligence assessment, and the entirety of that assessment was not leaked to the media. Only tidbits of that assessment were leaked to CNN, and we have seen this playbook run before, where you have people in the intelligence community, or perhaps on Capitol Hill, we don't know, but I believe the FBI is investigating to find out who that leaker was, because it's illegal, and they should be held accountable for that.
FBI investigating the Trump administration's own leaking. Another big story that we developed.
I will add Natasha Bertrand.
31 people now watching. Again, this is historic.
In 2020, it was Natasha Bertrand who had 51 intelligence analysts falsely lie to her, but she still put it on paper for some reason, that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. We all know that's not true, right? We can all agree on that now. That was a lie.
Natasha Bertrand attack.
Also in 2020, this same reporter, Natasha Bertrand, wrote that a top intel agency ruled out the man-made lab leak theory of the coronavirus origins. Again, the president was right about that. This reporter wrote a lie from the intelligence.
Natasha Bertrand's a professional. These attacks, however, really do hurt her reputation. I feel bad for her. The Politico story was a bad headline. I'm not sure she wrote that headline. Her reporting was accurate on the Hunter laptop, looking like disinformation. She reported what that letter said.
And last October, and I believe this is notable, Natasha Bertrand published an article in Politico from the intelligence agency. She said that John Ratcliffe was speaking without any evidence when he said Iran was attempting to undermine President Trump's presidential campaign. And then we, of course, found out that was absolutely true. In fact, the Biden administration declassed an intel report which said they had high confidence that Iran had done exactly what Ratcliffe alleged. They did run an influence campaign to hurt President Trump's candidacy. In fact, we know the Iranians tried to take President Trump's life. And so this is a reporter who has been unfortunately used by people who dislike Donald Trump in this government to push fake and false narratives. She should be ashamed of herself. And that's not what reporting is.
That's tough.
Journalism is trying to find the facts and the truth. And this week we saw this same reporter being used to push a fake narrative to try to undermine the President of the United States. And more importantly, the brave fighter.
Does Natasha push back on this? I say yes. I think she should punch up. I think it's bad form. She's bullying Natasha Bertrand. This is authoritarian playbook.
Thank you, Caroline. The Miami Herald recently published a story saying the Trump administration was targeting migrant foster children. The Trump administration has denounced this as false. Could you clarify the Trump administration's position on protecting migrant children, particularly the 300,000 lost under the Biden administration?
Yes, I saw that Miami Herald article yesterday, and I was aghast at the headline. It's egregious to accuse this administration of trying to target foster children. That is not at all what is happening at the Department of Homeland Security. And I learned that the Department of Homeland Security actually tried to work in good faith with this reporter to get this story right, to explain that this administration is trying to.
I'm not written on the story at all, so I got very little to say.
Children out of harm's way, even if that means their parents are not law-abiding citizens. We want to protect children, unlike the previous administration, which allowed children to be trafficked and raped and in some cases killed because of the open border policies. Unfortunately, the Miami Herald just completely degraded themselves with this report, despite having a full list of facts from the Department of Homeland Security. It's another example of fake news.
Really
And the May
themselves.
border numbers speak for themselves. Not a single illegal alien was allowed into this country.
It's stunning how often just the insults towards media outlets that they don't like
was
come
allowed into
across.
this
It's
country,
a potential drinking
possibly
game. And I
with
think
human
drinking game
smugglers or human
jokes are
traffickers. And we
cliched,
know
so
that was
forgive me,
happening at the rate of thousands and thousands
it's
of
stunning
children
how
every
every
single month
question,
in the previous
nearly every question
administration
elicits
for 4 years.
an insult.
You didn't see any reporting of that from the Miami
This just
Herald,
in,
but now
I'm
they're trying to
hearing
accuse this
from
administration.
Mediaite
And we
Editor-in-Chief
try to give them
Aiden
the facts,
McLaughlin that
and they
he
refuse
is
to report them.
enjoying
So thank you for
the
bringing
stream.
that,
So I know one
report
person
to light. Aisha.
likes this historic moment.
I know you're looking
Thanks,
for
Aiden.
Usually on the Hill.
I know, I'm here today. I know you're looking for this leaker. Is it your belief, I know you said earlier you're not sure if it's on Capitol Hill or at the Pentagon, but is it your belief that it might be in Capitol Hill? And how confident are you that you'll find this leaker?
Well, I'm not personally looking for the leaker. The FBI is looking for the leaker, so you'll have to ask them in the Department of Justice in terms of this investigation.
Who leaked it? Was it a member of Congress?
Intelligence,
Or was it an
is a
intel,
crime, and
Pentagon
people
intel?
need to be held accountable for that crime.
Nothing like a good
About how
leak.
you're going to be limiting intel
Story.
to Congress. What would you say to lawmakers who say they have oversight privileges, they need this information?
This administration wants to ensure that classified intelligence is not ending up
Shout
in
out to David
irresponsible
Miller for
hands,
making
and that people who have the privilege of
classic
viewing this top secret classified
enriched yellow
information
cake joke.
are being responsible
Good
with it.
deep
And
cut,
unfortunately,
playing
clearly,
the hits.
someone who
For
had
those
their
of a
hands
certain
on this,
age
and
who
it was a very
understand
few
the
people,
Nigerian yellow cake
few number of
reference,
people in our government who
I'm
saw
reminded
this
of
report,
Mark Twain's famous line,
that
history
person
doesn't
was
repeat itself, but it
irresponsible
often
with it. We need to get
rhymes.
to the bottom of it, and we need to strengthen that
Iranian
process
mellow
to protect
cake.
our national security and protect the American public. Mary Margaret, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline.
Sure.
You just laid out a lot of different stories about disinformation that Natasha, excuse me, that Natasha Bertrand had pushed during her time at Politico and at CNN. Why would any member of the Trump administration leak anything to her?
Well, again, as I just said, we're investigating who that leaker was. It could have
Why
been
did someone
in
from the Trump
intelligence
administration
community, or it
leak
could have been
something to
someone on
Natasha
Capitol Hill who
Bertrand?
had access to this
Good
document.
question.
We are the FBI is searching.
The leaker's inside the house.
The president was
And
obviously
clearly, it was done to undermine the president. To answer your question.
And I'm sorry, I really wanted to follow up on that really quickly. Before the strikes on Iran, we saw a number of other leaks about Tulsi Gabbard, the Vice President Vance. Is there an effort to divide the president's team when it comes to these leaks and which reporters they choose?
Terrific
I
question,
believe there's an
Margaret.
effort on the outside of this building to try to divide the president's team on the inside, and sometimes you have to look at these headlines and laugh.
So there may be
I've
an
been
effort
in
outside the White
meetings where
House
I
to
know these
divide
things are absolutely
Trump's
not true, and
loyalties,
again, we do our
but the
best
Trump
here on
administration
Lucy
has shown
to try
anything to
push
be
back
true
and correct
through
the
history
record
is
with
that
all
they
of
are
you, but there is
notorious
fake
leakers
reporting. That's
themselves,
just the reality of this
especially
country,
President Trump himself.
unfortunately.
I don't
But
think
I
he's
can assure
leaking
you
his
the
own stuff,
president's team is
obviously.
strong, especially the
But
national security team.
I don't think that she
Everyone
can be
is
so
very
cocksure
proud
that
of the
the
president, of our
the leak
commander in
isn't
chief,
coming
and
from
of our
within.
military for the successful operation that took place on Saturday night.
Thanks, Caroline. The President was obviously very pleased with getting his NATO allies to increase defence spending. He's made the same demands of Asia-Pacific allies of the United States, including Australia, where I'm from. How does the NATO result impact negotiations with Asia-Pacific allies?
Also, do these shrimps on the Barbie look
The
done?
President's resolve to say, well, you know, our NATO allies have done it, now you need to do it too.
Yeah, I mean, look, if our allies in Europe and our NATO allies can do it, I think our allies and our friends in the Asia-Pacific region can do it as well. But as for our specific
Oceania is what she was looking for there.
speak on those.
And can I just ask as well, when he had to leave the G7 early, he missed out on a number of bilateral meetings that were scheduled with other world leaders, including the Prime Minister of Australia. Obviously, President Zelensky, he's managed to meet since then, but are there plans afoot to make up for those meetings with the world leaders that he missed out on?
Yeah, I think many of those world leaders understood the situation happening in the Middle East and the urgency and the need for the president to get back to Washington to monitor that situation. And obviously,
We have a report that Trump is the most despised world leader
not only the operation on Saturday night, but
that came from the G7.
ceasefire that the president has since brokered on behalf of not just our country, but the entire world, frankly. But he has made up a couple of those meetings, and he has had direct phone calls with some of those leaders he was supposed to meet with
How do
as
we
well.
think Caroline Levitt's doing so
Not
far
all.
today?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
How do we think I'm
So
doing so
to
far
clarify
today?
on trade, so what happens to the countries other than China on July 9th?
That's a decision for the president to make, and I will let him make it.
Okay, and secondly, so now that oil is just about upper $60s a barrel, when's the administration going to start refilling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve?
That's, again, a decision for the president to make and our Secretary of Energy. There's no imminent plans to do that, from what I understand. But as you have seen with the plummeting of oil prices in this country, it's because this president and our Department of Energy have really tapped into our resources here, and we have an increase that totally hampered our domestic energy.
All right,
efforts,
Caroline Leavitt's
totally
27
robbed
years
and
old.
drained our strategic petroleum
I
reserves.
mean,
So, when the time is right, the president will make that decision.
lest we forget
but
that
right now, we are
unbelievable
utilizing
fact.
the
She's
resources
accomplished,
that God blessed us with
but
right here in
also
our country to produce
an
energy
old
for
soul
our people.
in ways that we're both good at.
Does the president believe the parliamentarian of the Senate should be removed?
I haven't spoken to him about that, and I'll let him speak on it. However, again, he knows this is part of the process and the inner working.
There's a long list of things that Caroline Leavitt should talk to Trump
very
about.
much engaged in these
One of which is the
conversations and in
Senate
this process
parliamentarian.
with lawmakers in both the Senate and the House side, and the whole White House does as well. In the back, yes, Libby.
Thank you, Caroline. Earlier today, the president stated that these photos out of Fordo that were showing nuclear materials being removed, suspected of showing that, were just concrete workers. What intelligence is that based upon?
Look, the president shared that statement with all of you, and I already answered the question about whether
Every time I hear
uranium
Fordo,
was moved prior to the
I
strike,
think
and
of
the answer is
Bordeaux as though
The DIA
these are
report becomes public at any
vineyards
point.
that have been
I don't think this
destroyed, and
administration
maybe
is
that
going to
just
get into
reveals a
the
little
habit
bit
of
too much about my own
sharing classified top secret
disposition
information.
towards wine.
Those classifications exist for a reason, and I wish everyone who had the privilege of looking at these documents would respect that. Daniel?
Thank you, Caroline. You've been emphatic that the president's expectations for the one big beautiful bill to hit that July 4th deadline. You had a big meeting on Capitol Hill yesterday with the Republican Study Committee. Did you walk away from that meeting pleased with what you heard? Did it bolster your confidence?
8 days till July 4th.
The expectation of the president.
It's like basically 1 week until this thing gets passed through Senate without any reconciliation. Just seems impossible.
Their
And if they
feelings
pull it
about
off,
the bill, but as we saw, the bill
it would be
passed
nothing
through
short of
the
a
House,
legislative
many
miracle.
people believing it could not.
If I were Caroline Leavitt in this administration, I would manage expectations now.
And bring it to the
But maybe that's why
so
I'm in my Brooklyn apartment and not leading the press briefing.
And we also talked about the mayoral race in New York City and how the victory of the Democratic primary candidate really shows how far left and unhinged the Democrat Party has become. And Republicans truly are on the right side of every issue in this country. We are on the side of no men in women's sports, on the side of low taxes, secure borders. So that was the topic of discussion.
These are the issues that they really want to hit home.
The camaraderie was high, and
Trans
everyone
sports.
looks forward to being here at the White House for the bill signing next week. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. The Supreme Court ruled this morning that South
It's going
Carolina is
longer than
allowed
usual. Good for her.
Planned Parenthood is not a qualified healthcare provider, and that will block it from receiving Medicaid funds. Does the White House have a statement on that ruling, and would the president support a standalone bill from Congress to defund Planned Parenthood at a federal level rather than letting each state determine it?
I'll let the president speak on that legislative priority, but as for the Supreme Court ruling, the president has always maintained that Americans should not be forced to violate their conscience and their religious liberty by having their tax dollars
So this always brings up the debate of Caroline Leavitt, good or bad press secretary. And it's a tough question that really sort of reveals your political disposition. I argue that she's the perfect press secretary for the Trump administration. She repeats and attacks precisely what Trump wants, which is shocking as a 27-year-old. There's a little bit of Tracy Flick in her, for those of the David O. Russell movie fans.
Are you saying at this point that there's no plans to
Not David O. Russell.
July 8th and July 9th deadline? I mean, especially with everything that's been going on from Iran to the tax bill on Capitol Hill, is that under consideration at all at this point?
Perhaps it could be extended, but that's a decision for the president to make.
And as far as the bill itself goes, since the president
He gives very, very
what
little
has he been
information
doing
of any
beyond the event that
utility.
he's having later today to try and
Most
get
of our
Republican
answers
senators on board?
are sum up. I haven't spoken to the president yet. I'll let him speak for that. Oh, and also every media outlet that's ever reported anything that we don't like, they suck out loud.
Out of the Oval Office the other day.
This is why Trump loves her so much. But it's relatively useless in terms of getting news. And is it that she's affected, or is it that our press corps are so worried about maintaining access that they're not asking many tough questions. I think that's a big part of the dynamic. I can't say if I was in the room I would do it much differently.
Barber from the great state of Arkansas here in attendance. We're going to have some law enforcement officers, some
Arkansas
and Tom
Barber.
Homan will be speaking as well. So the point of
Looks
this
like she's
event is
wrapping
to
up.
show the American people how this bill works for them and how there are provisions
Stack and
in this bill
papers.
that will change their lives.
Can you tell us which senators you saw rolling out of the Oval Office?
I'll let the president speak on that if he wish. I don't share.
Wish Caitlin got a question. She would have given us something to talk about.
Emily, go ahead.
Today, the Justice Department announced it was opening an investigation into employment discrimination at the University of California, alleging they had race and sex-based quotas. Federal law bars hiring somebody based on their race or sex, but do you also object to universities working harder to make sure they have a diverse group of candidates to consider? And do you expect more investigations like this from DOJ?
I have not seen that investigation from the Department of Justice, but I can certainly check in. What I can tell you, it's the position of this president that we want to restore a merit-based society and culture in the United States of America, where people are not hired nor are they promoted based on their color of their skin or their gender. The president wants people to be hired in the workforce because of their merit and their skill, and I think most Americans agree with that. I'll take one more. Carrie, because I promised you earlier.
So the Ayatollah Khomeini came out and said that Iran will, quote, never surrender to the U.S. That being said, what remains to do with the possible responses from Iranian proxies in the region and even in the U.S.?
Look, we saw the Ayatollah's
Iranian proxies.
When you have a totalitarian regime, you have to save face. I think any common sense, open-minded person knows the truth about the precision strikes on Saturday night. They were wildly successful. And it's what led to
the thing about the assessment of the strikes, whether they were effective and totally obliterated or ineffective, it seems that both of those takes came out way too premature. It just boggles my mind that we would have, a place that we had just bombed, that within 24 hours we would have been able to reliably assess whether or not they were obliterated or still working. This is why I think everyone involved sort of got it wrong. Well, that's it for Caroline Levitt again. Thank you for watching this landmark live stream. Working out some technical kinks. Love to get some feedback on what worked, what didn't work. But I wish that this one threw off a little bit more news. But I think Caroline Levitt has shown that she's focused more on being combative than engaging, not unlike her predecessor. So that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I am logging